2007 fiscal year. Do we have any guests tonight? I know of one. Want to stand up and give us your name, please? Yes, ma'am.
Oh, Carolyn Ross.
Carolyn Ross. Okay, let's see. We have some visitors down here, down front. Want to stand up, Mr. Harris?
I'm James Harris.
Okay. Let's start over here. Just stand up and introduce yourself, please.
I'm Mark.
Next. I'm glad the whole family's here tonight. Let's start down here. Oh, we have some more family. Good.
And I'm Alma Kalisa.
You want to wait for later? Okay. Let's see, we have a couple of out-of-town members of the society, Mr. Wade Johnson from Copenville. Anybody else we need to recognize? Any members we hadn't seen in quite a while? Okay, it's trivia time. The Constitution of Abbeville First Baptist Church is dated July 17, 1841. That's the same day as today, July 17, 1841. And was signed by W.H. Holcomb and Joseph Lane, who was, who was appointed the first pastor. This was first known as the Hopewell Baptist Church. The organizers and charter members were Charles L. Simmons, Latham J. Owen, Tyler Logan, Benjamin Johnson, Adam Singleton, John Bowles, James Simpson, Allen Humphreys, Burgess Bowles, George Humphreys, Amelia Ann Owen, Nancy Logan, Martha Owen, Harriet L. Johnson, Mary Couch, Jane Logan, Mary E. Simpson, Lucinda Humphreys, Louisa Humphreys, Margaret Hargraves, Mary Wright, and Susan Logan. Don't panic, I have the names here for you.
I was
Newsletter.
I was going to get to you afterwards. I didn't quit.
Well, so much for the trivia. If nobody has any objections tonight, our speaker has asked to go before our meeting. So if there are no objections, I'll now turn the program over to Georgia Singing. Here, so she has a good background in teaching in the country. Since she retired, she stayed very busy. She's done all sorts of things. She was instrumental in getting a historical marker for Freedmen's Bill. She helps out with Meals on Wheels. She helps out with the church. She stays busy, and sometimes she finds time to write some genealogy, some records of her family. We are pleased to have her tonight, and from her little talk that she gave at our last meeting, I know you'll enjoy it. Miss Susie Marshall.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I would begin by saying, to everything there is a season and a time and a purpose under the sun. It is a great pleasure for me to be asked to speak to you about African Americans in Oxford in the Fayette County, and I'll begin with Reconstruction. Good evening.
Good evening.
2 years after the Civil War ended in 1863, my maternal great-grandpa, George Washington Fox, migrated from Virginia to the Fayette County with his freedom papers in his pocket, in the lapel of his coat pocket. He settled in the Hassonville community of Lafayette County. He was one of the 5% Negroes, ex-slaves and ex-slaves who could read and write. So he married a native Choctaw Indian woman, had 13 children, and acquired 5,180 acres of abandoned land. He said he had been an industrious farmer who made plow lines from the bark of hickory trees. George Washington Fox died in 1896, was buried in the colored part of Clear Creek Cemetery. Epitaph on his tombstone, very tall one, reads, "Virtue was his truest guide, lived as a Christian died." My patron, my father's papa, Reuben Mitchell, was born of slave parents in Panola County, Mississippi. Stayed and worked on the bacon place of the Shepherd plantation with his parents and his extended family. Papa Rube told us, as we called him Papa Rube, that when freedom was declared, old master called them all to the big house and said, "Y'all free now. We ain't got nothing to do with you no more." He said they would go off, and then they would come back and stand around and let old master know this. He told them who had always told them what to do, how to do, and when. They would give him something to eat, and they would go on off again, and old master would say, "Y'all don't belong to us no more." They just kept coming back, going away and coming back. They didn't have nowhere to go, nothing to eat. The genealogy of my ancestors, gathered from an African American perspective, depicts the history of most African Americans. In Oxford, during the Reconstruction period, the Oxford Falcon newspaper, dated July 12, 1867, reported the following incident of a speech made by Jim Nelson, a colored man, on the occasion of the 4th of July celebration. Several white gentlemen were invited to address the audience of colored people first. Then Jim Nelson, about 35 years of age, was this principal marshal for the audience. He made a low bow and said, "My friend, I hope that anything I say won't be of offense to any person, white or black. My colored friends, we are all free now, just as free as the white folk are. I don't know how freedom come to us. They say the Yankees did it, made us free. I don't know whether they did or not, but whoever did it, I thank them. And we thank them. Although it make us, many of us, a heap worse off than we were before, but we love to be free. And we hope someday will make us a heap better off than we ever was before." Jim Nelson really reiterated the opening lines from Ecclesiastes 3:1 and 2 that says, "To everything there is a season and a time and a purpose under the sun." The United States Freedmen Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Land provided food, shelter, and clothing to 7,126 ex-slaves in Oxford, Lafayette County. The first schools were started under the Freedmen Bureau. The new government, established by Reconstruction Act, began in 1868 and lasted anywhere from 1 to 9 years. The experimentation of racial democracy was probably Reconstruction's greatest achievement. The opening of the University of Mississippi in the fall of citizens of the county for employment. They were employed in the construction of plank walkways from the square to the railroad station. Others hired themselves out as carpenters, day laborers, to rebuild the courthouse and other important buildings. Most of the freedmen settled in the vicinity of the railroad station, or railroad. The ex-slaves had no church, and they worshiped as they had when in bondage, until 8 ex-slave women. And I didn't bring my church history, and I have the names of all 8 of those black women who asked the pastor permission of the white church to transfer their membership to a bush harbor, which was located, built down in the old PB's estate, known then as Amadale subdivision. Jointly with the ex-slaves from the Methodist faith, they worshiped God together. In 1869, a small group of the Methodist faith purchased a fraction of lot number 472, which borders the Depot Street, now Jackson Avenue, and established a small plain Sewell Chapel Methodist Church. The original church building was replaced in 1910 by a red brick structure renamed Byrne Methodist Episcopal Church, now the office of John Bishop, the writer. 4 years later, the small congregation of Baptists established the first two-frame building, April 21st, 1873, on lot number 69. The first frame building was mysteriously destroyed by fire. In 1896, blind Jim Ivory became an integral part of the University of Mississippi. He was a member of Second Baptist Church and led the way in effort to rebuild the roof of the second frame colored building, church building. These two churches in Oxford, like many other black churches in the late 19th century, served the spiritual, social, and educational needs of the black people. When the ex-slaves were lost and homeless, it was a self-appointed black preacher who gathered them together to build churches and homes and schools. Down through the years, from generation to generation, the story is told that by the turn of the century, small houses dotted the area known as Freedmen Town, with small gardens and often livestock, such as pigs and chickens and cows. Water was furnished from wells and systems dug by the residents. The covered Frame Baptist Church at that time was located on the southeast edge of Freedmen Town. It is said that in 1905, a young black itinerant preacher from Memphis, Tennessee, who pastored St. John Baptist Church in Rural, was married to a teacher and an organist of the early Baptist Church. Mr. Walter Johnson, my first teacher when I was third grade when we moved to town in 1923, said that, told the anecdote that after the wedding ceremony was over, young unmarried women in the audience, in their excitement of witnessing the first church wedding, tore off or cut pieces from the bride's wedding gown as she proceeded down the aisle to the outside. The bride walked down the plank walk on the arms of her newlywed as ragged as a pillow. In the year of 1911, a stone Second Baptist Church replaced the second frame building. More families from the rural Fayette County began moving to town in ever increasing number so that their children could go to school longer and also to get jobs at the University of Mississippi. the entire Malcolm Johnson, Tammy Owens, Hewlett family moved. That's Samantha relatives, ancestors. Moved from the Clare Creek community to Oxford. Ben Price, as we used to call him, who owned the Amadale subdivision at that time. His servant, Walter Johnson, saw his wife Gertie from Memphis, Tennessee, to live in the family home of his grandmother, Anna Augusta Coleman. In 1924, my mother, Bertie Mitchell, Fox Mitchell, insisted that my father, Will Mitchell, leave the Burgess farm and move to town so that her then 4 children, there were 7 of us, could go to school 8 or 9 months in the year instead of 4 or 5 months. The neighborhood of Oxford, north of Jackson Avenue, west to 7th Street, now Martin Luther King Drive, is known as Freedmen Town. Research of the area was done by Mr. Walter Colbert and me. Also, Mr. Tankley was represented the Mayor Leslie. The documentation of the research was requested and done by Dr. David Santon, Historian Emeritus of the University of Mississippi. In his documentation, he stated that when the Freedmen Town subdivision was enlarged and improved under the Urban Renewal Grant by the federal government in 1974, the head of the Oxford Housing Authority was Mr. Walter Rogers, an African American, was asked by Mr. Will Lewis, who was junior, who was chairman, to name the area embraced by the renewal project. Mr. Rogers revived the old name of Freedmen Town. So the residents of the refurbished and expanded neighborhood now proudly refer to their community as Freedmen Town. The request was made and authorization of the Mississippi Department of Archives and History to erect a state historical marker to designate the area, Freedmen Town. The drafted text that's on the marker reads, after the Civil War, many freedmen from Lafayette County moved into Oxford, settled in the area bounded by Jackson Avenue, Price Street, the railroad, and Ninth Street, bought land, built schools and churches and houses, and exercised the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. The residents named their neighborhood Freedmen Town. We want to certainly do thank Mayor John Leslie, who signed the form with the request for the marker. And he also was a person who we couldn't get the history Department of History Archives wrote and said that they didn't have the money, but we could have a private department. So Mayor Leslie and Mr. Walter Coffey's Red Rider Group, or what kind of group is that? Rough Rider Group. They paid for the marker. And the marker was erected July 16, 1996. We had a ceremony in the street of Martin Luther King, August 5th, 1996. And I say again, we thank Dr. David Sanson for his documentation, and also Mayor Leslie, and all the other persons who were responsible for us getting the marker. The marker was requested in 1990, and by me, in behalf of the Senior Sewing and Savings Club, 60th anniversary, which was October last year. So the Senior Savings Club members helped with the celebration, and we are mighty Town marker that designate our area. We also had other projects that we have before the Board of Aldermen and with the new mayor, and that is the Freedmen Town subdivision marker there at Washington Avenue in East Place, and also a marker at the area where the middle school is. The Rosenwald School was placed there in 1910. I think it was wasn't one of the cities, it was a financial dispute. Roosevelt built schools in Mississippi for black folks during the early part of the 19th century. So when we moved to town in 1923, we lived on Dr. Stewart Place, right there where Bramley Street is. Dr. Stewart Place, W.W. Stewart Place, for 5 years. My father was a farmer also, a sharecropper farmer. And we walked from that area where the Bramley Street is, our house is there, across the wood of Amadale subdivision. And when I was invited there by one of the persons from Curious County, it was just a grand pleasure, because my father and mother had visited the servants in that area, and they would take, at that time, parents would take their children with them everywhere they went. It was just a pleasure for me to go back there to be reminded of how we used to walk through the woods to get to the school that Walter Johnson established for black children. It was called Del Mount Seminary. And when we moved to town, I was only 8 years old and couldn't read. We would walk through the woods, going to school, we'd come back through town from school was over. And the little white girls, who were smaller than me, about 6 years old, they could read, and we stopped at the variety store then, and they would read what was there, and I was wishing I could read, because I was 8 years old and couldn't read. But I think I progressed rapidly, though. I was done with promoting. I was telling some of my friends down there, I'm glad I could read. And I appreciate you all inviting me. And thank you so much for listening.